Good morning, everyone. A rare planning committee on a Monday. Just a bit of housekeeping.
There may be more.
You never know, Lee. You never know.
That's right.
You never know. If the fire alarm sounds, obviously, please vacate the building and obviously don't use the lifts. Go meet the Victoria statue. If you have signed in, please make sure you've signed out. Okay. Let's just move on to the agenda. We have apologies so far from Councillor Hugh Mason and Councillor Fleming. Do we have any standing deputies for them? So we don't have any for Councillor Fleming and not for Councillor Mason. Okay, that's fine. Declarations of members' interest. On both South Parade Pier items, I have a pecuniary interest because I live 100 yards from the pier and I can see it when I walk out my front door. So I shouldn't really be sitting on that item, and I've checked it with legal and they're happy with that. So we're going to have to elect a new chair. And any other interests? Councillor Brent? Mic, please. Can you use your mic, please?
Just say that we all, I think, probably know Nick Courtney very well indeed through our creative industries things. Just to make that for the record, it doesn't affect our thinking.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, actually, Councillor. Because I also know Nick Courtney's nephew Sam, who has done some scaffold work for me once before. So, no, I should probably mention that as well. No, we can't. Councillor Brent.
Sorry, it was just 16 Tregaron Avenue. I know Mr. Barber just as a colleague in a group I go to, but I don't know anything about, obviously, this. I just felt I needed to tell you I knew him.
That's fine. Yep, no, happy with
Thank
that.
you.
Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting, are they all agreed? Is everyone happy? Okay, agreed. Fine, we'll move on. Update on previous planning applications by the Assistant Director.
Members, this isn't an update on a planning application, but it's a matter that came to full council where there was a resolution that in light of the Grenville Tower fire, the council agreed to write to the LGA and the Police and Fire Minister asking for planning law to be changed to make it obligatory for planning departments and developers to consult with the fire service on applications which relate to purpose-built student accommodation, schools, hotels, high-rise office blocks, high-rise housing, large-scale sites and NHS buildings. The further part of the resolution was in the meanwhile that I ask you as a planning committee to consider immediate operation of a voluntary process offered by Hampshire Fire and Rescue Services to look at the above mentioned planning applications. Members, in the first instance, I'm asking that you agree that you want this to happen and that I approach Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service to confirm, firstly, that they're able to provide this service, and secondly, that they're sufficiently resourced to respond to consultations in a timely manner.
Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, so I completely agree with that. But nevertheless, in the past, I've lobbied so hard here for the police to have representation. And we did for a little while. The police did start to make comments on, or rather, crime prevention officer of some kind. But we never get any crime. We never get any crime prevention advice in this. We get a little line now and again. But with crime rocketing and all sorts of things going on at the moment, public order offences up 113% in Portsmouth last year. Violent crime up 21%. Overall crime up 26% in 2 years. You know, when you create nooks and crannies in planning applications, because we're looking to build more. Just bear with us if you wouldn't mind, Scott. No, it's all right. Because sometimes we create nooks and crannies with this push to develop every piece of land and little alleyways and things, and they're the things that enable a bit more crime to go on. So we've got to be very mindful of crime when we're doing these planning applications. That's all I beg, really and truly.
Thank you, Councillor. Very, very good points, thank you. And that's fine. I was only turning my head because I haven't got my hearing aid in, so I can't actually hear that well today.
Same with me.
No.
You would just move the mic a little closer.
Councillor Vernon Jackson. Make sure you get your mic on.
I'm wondering if we need to see if we can purchase a few council-owned ear trumpets for Lee, etc. It would add to the theatre of it, maybe. I think Claire's made a very good point, and it's sensible to make the offer to the fire service. I think the thing would be to say to them, look, you don't have to comment about every single planning application, only those ones that are really important and you think, so that they're able to give us the advice we need on the crucial ones without them feeling as if they're going to be overwhelmed with paperwork. So I think it's a very sensible thing to do, and if it, as it looks like, government will take some action to try to tighten building control regulations in the light of the Grenfell Tower disaster, that again will be a helpful thing to do, to have that link.
Very, very valid point there, Gerald. Thank you. Just going to move on. We have to obviously elect a chair for the first two items. Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Well, could I suggest Frank, on the basis that he's done it reasonably recently before, and seems to be the logical choice.
Councillor Hunt first.
Yeah, I'd love to have Frank. I just wonder if he'd bring his motorbike in, because I've seen him going around Hillsey on it, saying vote for Frank, and I'd love to see that here.
Yeah. So we've got a proposer and a seconder for Councillor Jonas to sit on the first two items of South Parade Pier as the chair. And we're going to ignore the condition about his motorbike. I don't think he'll get it through the lift. It's too big. Very good point. So are we all in favour of that, Councillor Jonas? Yep. Happy to move that. I will now leave the room and I will sit on my laptop and watch you outside.
Well, thank you, members, for that vote of confidence. When someone said he did it reasonably, I didn't know whether he did it reasonably well or it's reasonable to expect him. Anyway, moving on, we're now going to go straight to item 6, which is South Parade Pier, and I'd like Dawn Sate, if she's here, and Nick Courtney on behalf of the applicant, if he's here, to approach the bench, please. You don't. Only when you're asked to speak, and you'll be given 6 minutes so you can switch it off now. Off. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. The application relates to land adjacent to South Parade Pier. The site is an area of land adjacent to the eastern boundary of the pier, and I'd just like to draw your attention to the Supplementary Matters report, where there have been corrections made to references to the western elevation of the pier. It is in fact the eastern elevation of the pier. The above image highlights the extent of the application site. South Parade Pier is a Grade 2 listed building, and it is located within the Seafront Conservation Area. As such, a full planning application and an application for listed building consent must be considered, both of which will be covered under this presentation. The proposal is for the construction of an external raised terrace to the eastern boundary of South Parade Pier. The proposed terrace would wrap around the existing T-on-C kiosk, located here, and would have a floor space of approximately 100 square metres. The structure would be built directly on top of the shingle beach, would have a maximum height of 1.5 metres. The terrace would be accessed from Eastney Esplanade and would accommodate 19 tables and 76 seats for users of the kiosk. The slide above just highlights the existing southern and eastern elevations of the pier. Many of the features on these elevations have been retained in the format they were when the pier was rebuilt in 1908. Okay, thank you very much. The slide above shows the proposed elevations. The structure would measure approximately 10.3 metres in width and 15.6 metres in depth, and will be constructed in timber. And the proposed development, by virtue of its scale and its positioning along the eastern boundary, is considered to detract from the character and appearance of the conservation area, and would introduce a level of clutter to one of the pier's most prominent elevations, which is contrary to seafront policies and conservation area guidelines. Furthermore, in the absence of any information to the contrary in relation to proposed opening hours and the storage of tables and chairs, it could be reasonably interpreted that the development could have an impact on neighbouring amenities by virtue of an increased noise disturbance at unsociable hours. In terms of the impact on the listed pier, it is considered that the incongruous and bulky appearance of the structure, paired with the high visibility of the asset along Eastney Esplanade, would fail to preserve or enhance the special architectural or historical features of the Grade 2 listed pier. Added to that, it would result in a negative visual impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area, which again is contrary to national and local planning policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Courtney, you have 6 minutes to put your case.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nick Courtney. I've been asked to speak on behalf of the owners of the pier, and I'm here to discuss the application for approximately 100 metres of temporary decking to go on the beach next to the pier to allow 19 tables for people to enjoy tea and cake next to the pier. This is totally in line with the recommendations made in the Seafront Master Plan that states that ventures like this should be encouraged. In section 2.1, in objectives of the master plan, it calls for introducing a vibrant mix of leisure and tourism uses to the area, including small-scale cafes and restaurants that will attract people to the seafront all year round. Page 62, which relates directly to South Parade and the promenade, clearly states that this area should be transformed into a more dynamic space. South Parade Pier was recently awarded Pier of the Year, and the National Pier Society fully support this application and consider it to be a great idea. I'm told by the Portsmouth News that the Portsmouth City Council report states that it will detract from the pier's architectural quality and the conservation area. How exactly does a temporary bit of decking do either of these things? We already had this argument on a much larger scale in regard to the McCarthy and Stone development opposite the pier, and the council officers could not come up with one single constructive argument to support either of these points, much to the embarrassment of all those present, including myself. So that leaves public opinion, and I am pleased to see that only one objection this time, and of course a handful of concerned residents who want to make sure that no one has any fun after sunset that may disturb their peace and quiet. Well, the most that can go wrong here is someone might slurp their tea. Social media tells a very different story, with public opinion sitting unanimously on the side of the applicant. I won't read out all the comments as we don't have time, but this one sums it up nicely. PCC should not obstruct in any way further improvements that would enhance the pier. I'm sure the population of Portsmouth would give it their full backing. You might argue that we already have the Southsea Beach Cafe and a coffee cup, but the moment the sun comes out they are both full, and I don't see any offers or recommendations stopping them either. The vibrancy of Southsea seafront has been systematically destroyed over the last 50 years. All we have left is a nice walk. The least you can do is let them stop for a cup of tea. I assume the recommendations to turn this down is by the council officers, and if this is the case, then I would guess that you don't have to agree with them. As a voter, I will be very interested to see who supports this application, and I'm sure that many others will too, because it's easy for people to blame the council for everything that's wrong in this city. Let's hope today you can prove them wrong. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. If you turn your microphone off. Thank you. Members, questions? And yes, Gerald.
Thank you. Could I ask, how does the recommendation in front of us sit with the Seafront Master Plan, which specifically says that we should be encouraging more businesses and more, particularly cafes and restaurants along the seafront? I think it proposed that there should be at least 5 new ones. My understanding is we have 3 so far, so this would make a 4th. and I don't understand how the recommendation sits with that, with the Seafront Master Plan, which is an adopted policy of the City Council, and as I understand it, is relevant in terms of planning, because it's meant to inform developers about what we want. So I can't understand how this proposal, which looks to sit entirely within the proposals the City Council has called forward, could be viewed as being negative in a planning way. And I'd be very, very interested to see what the answer to that would be, because it just seems to be so bizarre. If you look at the coffee cup, it's hugely popular. It's got a bit of decking on the beach. And I know residents opposite didn't like it when it came forward, but I only ever hear praise for it now. Southsea Beach Cafe has a bit of decking on the beach. I only ever hear praise for it now as giving an extra facility to people coming down to Southsea. So I really just don't understand how this can possibly be viewed as opposing the Seafront Master Plan. It would seem to me, in policy terms, we have absolutely no choice but to support this application. And the idea, and I'd be interested to know what the thinking behind it, that a bit of decking and a few tables and chairs could mask the view of the pier seems bizarre. And to mean that it doesn't sit well in its historic setting. These are tables and chairs, for heaven's sake, a temporary thing. So I am beyond comprehension, and I would love to know what rationale there is behind any of this.
Okay, in relation to the policy PCS 9 for the seafront, if you take a look at page 10 of the committee report, it is correct that Portsmouth City Council will encourage and support redevelopment for leisure and tourism facilities along the seafront. However, this should be done without detracting from the open character of the seafront and protecting the open nature of the area and other undeveloped areas. This is, again, sort of supported by the seafront manager and her comments, who's, again, on page 10 has outlined that she has expressed concerns about the privatisation of currently open public space. So the thinking on the plan and application was that, yes, this type of use is supported, but it should not detract away from the openness of the space.
I'm sorry, so if you can't put it on the beach, but we want this to happen, where do you put it? Does it have to hover above the beach and be tethered by balloons or something? It seems bizarre that these are the recommendations coming forward to what looks as if it's a very sensible and small-scale application to support our seafront and the businesses on it.
If I can just maybe come in, as Niall said, the policy in the local plan and then obviously the seafront SBD does encourage the introduction of uses along the whole of the seafront to actually provide a diverse offer and to encourage people to travel along the seafront at all times of the year. However, this particular site, we're assessing the impact of what is being proposed against the listed building that it's being set against, and also against the character of the conservation area. And you can see from the reasons for refusal how we've articulated that we feel that the impact of what's being proposed against both the listed building and the character of the conservation area are such that we don't feel this proposal can be supported.
Thank you, Chair. Just trying to get some clarity around this. So there's two reasons for refusal. The second one, could I just get a steer from either Niall or Claire, please, as to how much weight proportionally they are putting on 1 and 2? Which is the one which is the most important of the two, or are they equal?
Both reasons for refusal are equal in weight. The second reason for refusal is based on the potential impact, as the local planning authority didn't go back with the applicant to seek further information about the impact on neighbouring amenity. But the first reason for refusal relates purely to the impact on the conservation area and the Grade 2 listed pier, but both must be considered equally.
Okay, so follow up then, Chair, if that's okay. So it is within the gift of the Planning Committee, is it not, to impose a condition on the grant of the hours of usage of that terrace?
Yeah, if the members of the Planning Committee felt that that condition would overcome the potential harm caused by the use of the structure, then they could choose to do that.
Thank you, Claire.
Chair, there are two applications involved with this. There's the planning application and there's listed building consent. Am I presuming that we're doing both of them as one debate, or are we going to try to run over them both twice?
You need to vote on each separately, but we are happy that you can have the debate on both applications in one
That
debate.
seems remarkably sensible.
Okay, so I was very surprised to see the leaders' comments in the newspapers about this. Mr. Courtney is quite correct, and Councillor Vernon Jackson quite correct. And as the chair that oversaw the implementation of the seafront strategy, and I would just like to point out to my colleague, actually, it's hugely successful. So, for example, on the seafront, Councillor Vernon Jackson was right. We have the South Sea Beach Cafe, which was a former loo, of course, but there were new loos opposite it. That's why we opened it. There was the Coffee Cup at Eastney. My word, I had to fight like fury to get that against the opposition of a particular councillor at that time. And it is enormously successful. In fact, I encouraged them to be twice as large, but they only took up one half of the land that was offered to them. And indeed, there is decking around that. And we had to overcome some difficulties around the nature of the beach. But it has been preserved. It's not harmed the beach, and now it's bringing in an enormous amount of money for local jobs, trades and industries. We've also got the Hot Walls Cafe now, which is part of the seafront strategy. The new tennis pavilion tea rooms at Watkins and Foe, and the Greens Cafe, and the expanded 10th hole. We also have Southsea Castle Cafe now, and that is an historic building with its wedding venues. And the reason I'm making these points, Mr. Chairman, is these are all like the tennis pavilion is 1930s, the new Greens Cafe is brand new, but the Square Tower, which now does venues and business, the point that we for doing this was we wanted to put money into these historic buildings. We wanted them to succeed, and by getting them to become viable, by being economically active and making cash and money to put back into the business, means that these buildings continue to be preserved and used. By using them, you preserve them into the future. That is what we did when we were in administration. All of these things have been successful. All of these are new businesses. All of these things are creating new jobs along the seafront. So that's very clear. I didn't agree with Donna Jones one bit when I read it in the newspaper. I was quite surprised to see it. But anyway, so what I'm going to propose is that in the recommendation for refusal, in 1, after the word the proposed raised terrace would, by virtue, it would read now the proposed terrace would not, by virtue of its scale and position, fail to preserve or enhance, blah, blah, blah. And then you go to the 4th line, where it says it would detract from the architectural quality of the pier. I've looked at that and I judged it. I don't believe it will. So I don't believe it will detract from the architectural quality. So the word not would go in between would and detract, would not detract. And after uncluttered views, the rest would be scrubbed out. So in other words, I'm proposing that we allow this for the reasons I've just given. And I'm sure other people will add to it. I'm particularly interested to listen to the discussion around the closing times. It's tea and cake. I'm not sure many people have been doing tea and cake 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. But, Mr. Chairman, I do wonder, through you and with indulgence, whether we just might ask the applicant's representative what sort of time that they are thinking about, because we do need some clarity around about that. And that really is the only issue that is in the report from the representations that I can see, is that people are wondering what the opening hours would be. I think if there's an understanding about that, that everybody would be much happier. So there you are. I've made a proposition, and we should do this.
Right, before I go to Councillor Gerald Ronan Jackson, I will ask the applicant if he knows of the proposed opening hours for this new venue.
Yeah, I discussed this morning, and they weren't 100%, but they will be happy with around 8 o'clock in the evening. Like you said, it's tea and cake. It'll be a shame if there was a really nice day and the sun was shining a little bit later than that and we had to close, but it is around the 8 o'clock or somewhere around that.
Thank you.
But because I add into the proposition the condition that it closes at 8 o'clock, and if they find that they're being hugely successful and different and they want to come back and talk to us again later on, then we'll look at it again.
Gerald.
Thank you. I'm happy to second that. It seems to me that the pier has been through a very difficult time. We've had owners who didn't look after it. It's now in a much better state, and people have put the owners have put a lot of money into it to redo it, and it's great that it's open again. But the point of what the council should be doing is to support businesses along the seafront and encourage them. And therefore, I was really surprised to see this recommendation. If we're going to try to make sure that the pier is open and viable for the long term, the council's got to do what it can to make sure that it works and survives and prospers as a business. And this seems to me an entirely sensible proposition that's coming forward. I think it's entirely sensible, as Lee has said, that we put a time limit on it of, say, 8 o'clock, so that we can address some concerns from local residents. But if we as a council are seen to be opposing the pier being a working, thriving business, then I think that's a terrible place for the City Council to be in. So I think this is a sensible thing to do. The bit I think as well that we need to be aware of is that, unless Mr Courtney can tell me otherwise, the beach is owned by the council. So the council would have to grant a licence for this to happen. My understanding is that we own a lease from either Natural England or the Crown Estates for the whole of the beach, and therefore it is within our gift. My concern is that even if here we give planning permission, the decision about whether a licence could be granted rests with the Cabinet member with responsibility for planning, regeneration and economic development, who is the leader of the council, who's already expressed her opposition to this. So I think that is a significant difficulty. I hope here we will do the right thing and we would encourage local businesses and encourage the pier, and I hope that we unanimously support giving them planning permission so that they've taken another step towards making sure that the pier is open, viable and thriving for the future.
Yeah, if I could come back, Councillor Vernon Jackson, you're quite right to point out that this application doesn't relate to the pier. It relates to land adjacent to the pier, and therefore it relates to land adjacent to the pier. So in terms of whether we are supporting bringing back into use part of the pier isn't relevant to the discussion this morning, because that's not the application that's before you. In terms of your role as a planning committee, obviously you're making a judgment on whether the change of use of this land and the construction of the terrace is an acceptable thing in planning terms, and assessing the impact that has on both the setting of a listed building and the conservation area. Issues around land ownership is outside the remit of the planning committee, so for this morning you must just consider whether or not you think this land should be used for the purposes in front of you today.
It is, but it just that's very helpful. The report talks about the loss of public open space. I've had nobody moaning about the loss of public open space, the public being able to go and sit and have a cup of coffee at the coffee cup on the beach. I've had nobody moan to me about people, members of the public, being able to have a coffee on the decking on the beach at Southsea the Beach Cafe. And the proportion of the beach we're talking about, 100 square metres out of the whole of the beach length, from all the way down from the Round Tower down to Eastney, it is a minuscule proportion, and I think the report takes it completely over the top, and it's not a good reason to say no.
And in terms for the planning committee, that is the planning consideration you have to make this morning. Do you want the beach to be lost from general public use and put into a more specific use for people using that terrace in connection with the sale of tea and cakes? But just on one further point, there's a move an approval. We've talked about 8 p.m. as a closing time. Can we just confirm what would be the opening time? Well, it does matter because otherwise...
I think that you're right. I mean,
it's from and to,
yeah,
isn't
indeed.
it?
In the morning, people don't really get much going much before 9 o'clock, but they're going to want to set up, I would have thought, around about 8 o'clock in the morning. So from 0800 to 2000.
Fine.
Right, ma'am. Sorry, Steve.
Chair, would you permit a question? Yes. Yeah. In terms of the sea defences reworking that's taking place, obviously the whole of the seafront up as far from the Yompa all the way down the other end is affected. Has any discussion with that team taken place around this? I'm just trying to think about the applicant here. We don't particularly want them to construct a terrace and then 6 months later some structural engineer turns up and says, actually, we're raising the prom height here by ½ a metre and therefore what you've built is now completely unacceptable. Just wondering whether we've done some joined up thinking on this.
The East Solent Coastal Partnership are aware of this application.
I haven't commented on it at all.
They haven't commented directly on the application.
Right, members, we've had comments and questions, and I'm going to make a comment on this. Like some of the members and people in this room, we've lived here a long time and watched the rise and fall of this South Parry Pier. Until now, this it's had the accolade of being voted Pier of the Year. Therefore, the owners have got to be congratulated for the hard work and the money they've invested in this. And my concern actually was just what Councillor Pitt said, that I wouldn't want these people that have sunk a lot of money into this to make it a success, go ahead with something that in 2 years' time the sea defences will completely transform. And so my concern is that by granting them this, whilst I've no objection to it in theory, in the long term, or not in the long term, it could be in the 2-year term, that it'd be null and void because we would be covering most of it in concrete anyway to be the, and that's just my comment on this before we go to the vote. So the proposal we've had.
Yeah, sure. I'll just, if I may, just make a point about it because that's the economics of it. So that is their risk, isn't it? That's their plan. They know what they're doing. So that is their issue, as it were, and they need to own that. So I hope that doesn't. I understand what you're saying, Chairman, but I don't think that today that's something that we should be considering. Particularly, that's their risk and their issue and their plan. Not that I don't want to cause any argument.
No, it wasn't that. It was just a personal thing. Having lived here all my life and watched the demise and then the rise of it, and no one's happier than me. It looks great. It's good when you go on there. So I don't think I could advertise it any better than that myself. But it was just something I felt. You know, we're coming out with our what we think. It's comments, and that's all I want to know. So on that, if there's no more comments, we have a proposition from Councillor Hunt, yes? Indeed. And seconded by Councillor Gerald Vernon Jackson that we we go against the officer's recommended refusal and allow this to proceed with the conditions that have been said. That's the opening and closing hours, and what was the other one? Yeah. That was it, was it? Okay. So, members, it's over to you. All those in favour of Councillor Hunt's, please vote. That is unanimous. Yeah, I believe now that if, as we've granted that one, we now vote on whether it's the next one is affected. Is that right? So, listed. Do we agree then? A proposal.
Can I propose that we give listed building consent in line with the previous decision?
Can I ask a question? Is it possible for us to write to the, as a planning committee, to say we've talked about this amongst ourselves, and write to Councillor Jones and say, would you please reconsider her position so that the PRED portfolio holder, she'll give this very serious consideration if she has to give consent for the land to be used in that way?
It's not a planning matter, it then becomes a landowner matter, whether as a landowner we think this is an appropriate use, and also as a landowner in light of the sea defences, whether we think it's the right thing to do to allow this land to be used in this way. So it's a separate matter from the planning.
And Councillor Hunt, I'm pretty certain that what we've discussed here today will be reported back in the usual manner.
And Chairman, I think the other option, of course, is if there is a different person doing this role in a couple of weeks, there may be a different answer.
I couldn't possibly comment. Members, we're going to vote on the buildings, a listed building. We've had a proposal from, Councillor Gerald Van-Acton, second by Councillor Steve Pitt, that all those in agreement, please raise their hands. Unanimous. Thank you. Members, thank you, Mr. Courtney.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, shall we just move on to the next item? Councillor Hunt, Councillor Jonas, we'll go into the next item, please. I'm pretty sure we've all got places we want to be. We haven't got. Wow. I'm pretty sure you're wearing some trainers out at the moment, Gerald, delivering all those leaflets. Okay. The objectors aren't here at the moment, so we're just going to move ahead with the officer's presentation.
Chairman, could I suggest, are we expecting the people to come to look at Tregoran? If we do think they're arriving, should we look at the Portland Hotel first because there's nobody listed?
No.
Did you say, I'm sorry, great minds think alike?
No, that's fine, Gerald. I think that's actually a really sensible point. Sorry. Gary is behind you. He has arrived early, so we'll move over to the Portland Hotel. Yeah, no, perfect.
It just seems to me polite, and it may be if they don't turn up anyway, but we've given them a chance.
Yeah, at least we can say they can look back and say we've given the opportunity. I think that's a
Absolutely.
fairly fair point.
We'll just do the next hand rounds then, so you'll get the Portland Hotel now.
I'm happy for the officer to start.
Okay, right. Good morning, members. Just before I start, I'd draw your attention to the supplementary matter sheet, which details 2 additional consultee responses that have been received since the report was written from Environmental Health and our waste team. Nothing that's in the supplementary matter sheet. Raising no significant concerns with the proposal, but there are some minor alterations and an additional condition relating to the operating hours of the ground floor commercial use. So the application site relates to a piece of land, you know it well, to the rear of the former Portland Hotel, Portland Terrace and Portland Court, fronting onto Tunbridge Street. You can make out the site just there, St Jude's Church, Kent Road, Palmerston Road precinct, and mainly service areas associated with shops onto Palmerston Road. Permission is again sought for the construction of a 4-storey building comprising a ground floor office within Class B1A and 4 dwellings above. Just showing the application site. Again, you can just see it in front of, or in this picture to the front of Portland Terrace, and again just sitting in this position here. Members, you will recall that a similar proposal was refused by the Planning Committee in October 2017 on parking grounds. The reasons for refusal did not relate to the principle of the development, the design or impact on amenity. You will also recall that there was a subsequent application to reduce the parking at the former Portland Hotel development site, which was also refused on the same parking grounds in February this year. That application is currently at appeal. Whilst you must consider all of the planning merits of this proposal again, principally you are considering whether this proposal now comes over the previous reason for refusal on parking grounds. Now, following the previous decisions, the building's footprint has been reduced, which has allowed for the incorporation of 5 parking spaces to serve for now 4 dwellings within the building. So you can just see the 5 parking spaces within the existing car park area just in there. The drawing shows the provision for the former Portland Hotel, which was the application you considered in February, which are these 3 spaces here, remain unaffected by this current proposal. Now, in addition to reducing the building's footprint, the internal layout has been modified, reducing the number of units proposed from 6 to 4. It was previously 3 1-bed units and 3 2-bed units. It's now 2 1-bed units and 2 2-bed units. Just showing the ground floor commercial space, we've now lost the integral garages. Then at first floor level, 2 1-bedroom flats. Moving up through the building, second and third floor level, a further 2 2-bedroom flats. The revised layout has also allowed for the removal of habitable room windows along the west-facing window, which reduces overlooking towards Portland Terrace, and additional windows incorporated onto the eastern elevation. Now, the reduced footprint and changes to the fenestration have had a positive impact on buildings' design, resulting in more pleasing proportions, particularly to the eastern elevation, which will be onto Tunbridge Street. These are the proposed north and south elevations. I do have a comparison slide later on. And just for some context, the application site, just sitting in here, this former car park area. Within the street scene, you can just see the application site sitting out from behind Portland Court, and then the application site and its relationship to Portland Court in here and the larger Portland Terrace behind. Sorry. And this one's just showing a comparison between the two proposals. On the right-hand side is the refused scheme with the 4 parking spaces, 2 external and 2 within integral garages. You note that the building line has been chopped back to allow for 5 external parking spaces. Now, on the basis the building's height, position and relationship with Portland Terrace has not changed from that previously considered, and the building's footprint and west-facing windows have been reduced, it's considered that the proposal remains acceptable in amenity terms. As the 5 off-road parking spaces to serve the 4 dwellings meets the requirements of the parking standards SPD, it's now considered that the parking is in accordance with our policies. And this is just a comparison, just to show the improved appearance from reducing the width of the building and the number of windows included on the east-facing elevation. That's the previously refused scheme on the right. And again, a comparison between that previously considered on the right and the current proposal on the left. Overall, it's considered that the proposal represents an improvement on that previously approved by the planning inspector and overcomes the previous concerns of the planning committee on parking grounds previously. Members, you have a detailed report in front of you, and for the reasons set out, the application comes with a recommendation of conditional permission, subject to securing SPA mitigation and no further representations being received, raising new planning issues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Gary. Over to members. Do we have questions? Okay, that is rare. Oh, Councillor Pitt, you've ruined it.
Sorry, I just assumed that everybody else was going to jump in and thought I'd be patient, so I don't need to be. Could I just ask Gary to confirm, please, whether the details of condition 7 do address the concerns raised in the supplementary matters sheet around the environmental health and noise issues?
Okay, condition 7 was the same condition as that previously considered, which was based on comments by the environmental health team, so is a condition that they recommended previously. The additional condition relates to, based on the comments received from environmental health, relates to the opening hours of the commercial unit at ground floor level.
So is that covered within the condition?
Yes.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions before we move on to comments? Okay, we're on to comments. Councillor Hunt, then Councillor Jonas.
So this reminds me of the sort of the fight we had over Branksmere House, which is just round the other side. Thomas Ellis Owen Properties, Thomas Owen Southsea, and so on. And I remember back then that the applicant wanted to build basically sugar cubes on stilts. And I remember one of the ward councillors back then was very much for this, but thankfully she didn't win. We've got it by 1 vote, and we've got a really nice application along there now in Queen's Crescent. But the point is, by the committee sticking together and working with officers too, and we get better applications. And that's what people want. Our city is entitled to have more and better. And this is a much better application than before. The truth of it is, it is going to spoil the view rather into that part of the back of Portland Terrace. But, I mean, we also have to balance that up against the fact that people want new units of accommodation, flats and houses to live in. Is a much better application than before. The parking has been addressed. We'd be absolutely mad not to want to at least say we can go ahead with this in the circumstances. So I move the proposition.
Thank you, Councillor
Councillor's
Hunt.
proposition.
Councillor Jonas.
Well, my comments are roughly the same as Councillor Hunt's, and that is they seem to have addressed all the little niggles that we've put in front of them. The officers are quite happy with it. The conditions look good, so I'd be happy to second that proposition.
Thank you for that, Councillor Jones. Do we have any other comments? Councillor Pitt.
Just an observation, really, more than anything else, in that last time this was before us, the previous application, we had residents here who were not happy with it at all. So it's pleasing to see that there are no representations made this time, which goes along with the things that Councillor Jonas and Councillor Hunt have both said, that if we asked them to make some changes, they've made changes, and it appears that we can only assume that the local residents are now happy with it, since none of them have objected. So I think we've got what we all wanted.
Yeah, no, I think on that point it's quite sensible to mention. The only reason it is here is because obviously the previous applications, it wouldn't have been here any other reason. Well, I wouldn't have been here for any other reason. Yeah, you know, it's actually a really good point, Councillor Pitt. And Councillor Vernon Jackson.
Well, I'm not keen on this. I think it's an overdevelopment of a site, but we've lost that. Planning Inspectorate hasn't agreed with us and has given in principle support for the development of this site. When this originally came up, the owners of the Portland Hotel said if they were allowed to develop this, then they would be able to have the money to be able to redo the Portland Hotel and bring that back into use. I hope they stick to their word. But my personal view is that it's inappropriate for this to be developed, but we've been stuffed, as usual, by the Planning Inspectorate.
Thank you for those candid words. Do we have any other comments? Do you want to jump in there, Claire?
Yeah, sorry, just to confirm. No, just to confirm with members that we are seeking delegated authority because the consultation period doesn't end until the 4th of May.
I think on the 4th of May, I think a lot of us will probably be very tired, if I'm honest. Do we have any other comments? No comments. So we have a proposition put forward by Councillor Hunt, seconded by Councillor Jonas. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Conditional permission. Then we go back to the front of our agenda. And we go to Tregarron Avenue. Thank you for your patience. Much appreciated. When you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. So this application relates to this property here, which is number 16 Tregarron Avenue. As you can see, the street scene's quite varied. There's a lot of large attached properties. So it's located on the western side to the south of Havant Road. So the application is for the construction of a two-storey front extension. That will provide a kitchen at ground floor and a bedroom with an ensuite at first floor. So it's effectively squaring off this section here to create, the kitchen here and the bedroom here. So this is the existing elevations. As you can see, there's already a two-storey front extension already for the property. This serves a garage and a playroom. And this is the proposed elevations. So this is where the proposed extension would be. It would be constructed with materials to match the existing, with fenestration to align with the existing, and it would also include increasing the size of these side windows here, just to create larger window features. There would also be some alterations to the rear elevation, but this is under permitted development and wouldn't require planning permission. So here's some photos of the site. This is the application site here, just showing it from the street scene. And this is the relationship with the neighbouring dwelling, which is number 18 Tregarron Avenue. And this is the current view from the proposed side windows, which are being enlarged, just showing, there already is a degree of overlooking to the neighbouring property. And this is the existing view from the first floor bedroom. So the proposal will include projecting it forward for the two-storey extension. And this is the current view from the side window of the two-storey front extension. And again, another view from the ground floor of the property. So these photos are taken from the neighbouring property's side dormer window. This will be looking out onto the proposed two-storey extension here. And this is taken from the neighbouring occupier's rear garden, just to show, the proposed enlargement of the windows will be here in the same location as existing, just showing their impact from their outdoor amenity space. Again, this is a photo. This is from the secondary living room window. There's also a larger bifolding window serving this lounge area, and this is another photo showing the proposed enlargement of the side windows from the rear bedroom. We consider this to be acceptable in design terms and wouldn't cause a significant impact on the amenity of the neighbouring occupiers, and have therefore recommended conditional permission. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Jane's just going to check outside to see if they're stood outside waiting potential objectors, because the door is shut. No, nobody there. I'm happy to move on. Do you have any questions? Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair. When we look at these sort of applications, we often look at them in relation to the adjoining buildings and the continuity and rhythm of the street scene. Have any other houses on this road already got similar extensions? Are we creating a precedent here? Just appreciate some thoughts on that, because we often get shown pictures of how it looks front on in relation to adjacent properties, and I don't think we really understand what we might be doing.
As you can see from the site location plan here, you can see it's quite varied, and there have been a number of similar extensions to these properties within Tregaron Avenue. It may not be the same proposal, but a lot of these properties have been altered recently.
On the front?
Yes, on the front.
Okay.
Okay, do we have any more questions? No. On to comments. I see Councillor Vernon Jackson.
I'm just wondering why it's here.
There was a deputation request from the neighbouring residents at
Oh,
9:18.
okay, yeah, so that's the reason.
Yeah.
Fine.
I'm of the same opinion. I'm a bit on that one. Councillor Jonas.
I'd just like to propose the officer's recommendations.
Yeah, I'll happily second that one. Does anyone have any more comments? Okay, all those in favour. We have a proposition from Councillor Jonas, seconded by myself. All those in favour, Councillor New? Yeah. That's unanimous. Very brief, good hour. That concludes today's planning committee. Of course you can, Councillor Vernon
Well, no,
Jackson.
I just think it's right in front of the minutes that we, this is Colin's last meeting as a councillor, and I think we need to recognise that in the minutes and say...
Well, potentially it's his last meeting.
No, Colin and I have agreed with each other, and Colin has said it is his last meeting. So I think we need to take him at his word. But we need to recognise that sometimes.
No, I totally agree, actually. He's been on this committee ever since I've been a councillor, so yeah, I'm quite happy to propose that one as well. Wow. Councillor Pitt.
And while we're having a loving, I think it is appropriate to thank the officers for all their work over the last municipal year in presenting everything to us. And I think we're getting more detailed plans more consistently. We're getting a real regularity around the way proposals are being put to us, which really helps us in making our decisions. And also to thank yourself, Councillor Jonas and Councillor Fleming, for being our chairs.
I think thank you for that as well. I appreciate that. But also as well, I agree with the officers. On that point, because the planning committee has changed a lot in 3 years since I've been sitting on it, and we're getting much more detail, making better informed decisions because of it. So yeah, I totally agree, Councillor Pitt, and I wish that was in the minutes as well. But if we conclude today's meeting, and we'll see everybody again at the end of May, potentially.